Welcome to The Sideshow.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of The Sideshow. Today, Mike is going to be leading the charge. So, Mike, why don't you let everybody know what we're going to be diving into today?
Thanks, Mark. We're going to be talking about an album that I think is one of the more interesting albums that you're going to come across, despite the fact that it's from a band that I wouldn't number amongst my favorite artists, although I appreciate their material, and it's a style of music that I, generally speaking, don't care for. With that,
I don't like the band, don't like the music.
With that said, I think it's a worthwhile band to talk about, and I think this is a worthwhile band or a worthwhile album to listen to. There's a reason why I bought it back in the day, and we're going to talk about the Kraftwerk album "Computer World" and side one, and the band is Kraftwerk, and the style of music, and there's various labels. The label that I choose to put on it is synth pop. And I think that Kraftwerk is arguably was the original group of artists that really created, to a large extent, this type of music. And there's there's a lot of synth pop that became big in the 1980s. Kraftwerk, this album came out in 1981, but Kraftwerk had started to do this kind of stuff, earlier into the 70s. And eventually, in the late 70s and then into the 80s, bands like the Human League, Don't You Want Me was a huge international hit. Gary Newman, back, and he had a relatively short window of time, but his song "Cars" was a big international hit. Bands like Depeche Mode, Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, Soft Cell, Tainted Love, Ultravox, the Pet Shop Boys, a bunch of bands that I never listened to were big. I heard the Human League, Don't You Want Me, Fascination, songs that were on the radio. But some of these other bands that I just rattled off are bands that I'd heard of and kind of knew kind of what they played, but I never went and bought albums. I wouldn't recognize material from a lot of those bands. But that stuff was big in the 1980s. It really was. And I think that this album by Kraftwerk is where they were kind of stepping in as the elder statesmen of this type of music when it was really starting to take off. And so I think that it's musically significant for those reasons. And I think that kind of just where they were coming from on this album. This album came out in 1981. And they're talking about how computers were going to take over the world, was basically where they were coming from in a lot of ways. And here we are. This is 45 years later.
Yeah.
Think they were onto something? Back then. Nobody had a home computer in 1981, or at least nobody, unless they had more money than we did when we were growing up, or when we were 18, in 1981. But in any case, Kraftwerk is a band. They were from Germany, and they played sort of experimental electronic music at the when they first started. And to be totally frank, I haven't listened to any of that early music by Kraftwerk. But my my sense is that it was sort of like Tangerine Dream, sort of this krautrock, electronic, experimental music. but the first album that most people might have been heard of or aware of to some extent came out in 1974 called Autobahn, and there was a side-long track on the album, like 22 minutes long, the title track Autobahn, and it was the purpose of the track was to sort of try and encapsulate getting into your car and taking a drive in Germany on the Autobahn, the highway system in Germany. And it was around the time of this album where they'd started to get into the rudimentary basics of what came to be synth pop or techno pop. And it was less, sort of washes of sound, more like sequenced patterns, electronic drums, drum machines.
Yeah.
And so, you listen to some early Tangerine Dream, and it's sort of like this Brian Eno like ambient music. It doesn't have the same beat as most pop music, and certainly the sort of techno pop, synth pop that was big in the 80s, where it was drum machines and synthesizers. And an Autobahn is kind of an acquired taste. But if you listen to it, I mean, the root of, drum machine, repeated patterns of notes on a synthesizer, that stuff is already there. And, over the course of the 70s, they put out a number of other albums, including in 1976, an album called Trans-Europe Express, which was referring, the title was referring to the rail system in Europe, which is a very efficient and convenient way to travel, on the continent in Europe. I'm sure you've done a fair amount of traveling by train in Europe. My wife and I, we've been to Europe on a number of occasions and have traveled by train.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of expanded on this, it had more compressed songs, but was starting to develop this synth pop style, drum machines, synthesizers. There was no conventional drummer. There was no bass player. There was no guitarist in Kraftwerk.
Yeah.
That's not how they created their music. That's not how they created the sounds that made up their music. And so, Trans-Europe Express, sort of alludes to a more joined system of travel on the European continent. In 1978, they put out an album, and I ended up at some point I got a vinyl copy of this album. I've got a vinyl copy of Autobahn as well, but it was called in 1978. The album was called Man Machine, and the opening track was "We Are the Robots." And just the graphics on the album, sort of Devo-like, automaton, color coordinated uniforms for the band, which were basically just black trousers, red shirts, and black skinny ties.
Yeah.
And then the song "Man Machine," and the first time the term techno pop was used, apparently, was a music reviewer who was reviewing their 1978 album Man Machine. He referred to their music as techno pop, and that was the first time that term was used. So even before Computer World, people were starting to say, look, there's a new sort of music that is coming about, and it's music that's created by synthesizers. And not created by by anything that isn't electrically, synthetically created, whether it was synthetic drums, a drum machine, or just synthesized sounds. And the Moog synthesizer had come out earlier in the 70s and was used by some mainstream artists. I mean, there may have been some synthesizers used on Abbey Road. When you can hear towards in parts of Here Comes the Sun, you can hear a synthesizer being used. So and Pink Floyd, for example, I mean, Dark Side of the Moon started to use synthesizers and whatnot. So, but that was used more in the context of a conventional pop or rock band,
Yeah.
drums, bass, guitar, keyboards. It was
and a lot of times it was used to either like enhance the bass line or of what the song still would have existed without that. It helped with the with the mood and the beat and something a little bit different to exaggerate his style, but it wasn't the main act in a lot of the music.
So in any case, we come to 1981. And Computer World is the album that they released, and it was because later that year, that's when the Human League's Dare album came out, which had "Don't You Want Me," and I guess I would imagine that most people who listen to classic rock era music have heard that song, whether they like it or not. But a lot of people really liked it. It's it was a very successful song. And then all these other bands that I referred to earlier, and a lot of others, started coming out and having this music. I can still remember the first time I saw a band where it was all keyboard players. This would have been 1982, 1983, that neck of the woods at First Avenue in Minneapolis when I was going to college there. It became a big thing, and also early in the 80s, computers started to become more prevalent in life. And so I think that the reason why I think this is the Kraftwerk album that's most worth talking about is because it sort of shows the intersecting forces that were at work in the world musically in terms of this synth pop craze that was going to be a big part of music in at least the early 80s. And also the proliferation of computers in our life. And this is building off of their previous albums, Man Machine, We Are the Robots, and just sort of the mechanization of things and taking the blood out of so much of what happens in human interaction, blah 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 blah. So it's also being done by a band that they've been doing this for a while. You mentioned some of their earlier albums, and I haven't focused a lot of time on those either. But early 1970, their first album. But the progression from there to this particular album, I mean, they weren't riding a wave. There was a lot of it that they were literally making. Some of these electronic devices and instruments that are being used, they actually invented. Their two founders, Florian Schneider and Ralph Hutter, they've got a patent on one of the earliest electronic drum kits that are out there. They also went to like an electronics firm to get one of the earliest musical sequencers built, and tools like vocoders for electronic vocals and these types of things. I mean, they were actually the ones building these things. Yeah. And like nowadays, especially nowadays with the way that music is produced, I mean, this stuff is in every studio. It's in a lot of the songs that we hear today. I mean, it's just normal. But I mean, they literally were inventing the equipment that was doing these things. And then to your point, by the time we get to 1980, 1981, the early 1980s, this stuff is starting to be used by bands that are really being recognized more as pop bands. Yes, they're techno pop, but the Pet Shop Boys, I mean, they couldn't tour originally because all their music was done with computers and synthesizers, and it wasn't a fun act to watch, so they had to kind of modify that. But it really became kind of a mainstream thing, and these guys were right smack dab in the middle of the creation of it. So very important band in how we listen to all music nowadays, not just techno pop or synthetic or robot pop or whatever we want to call it. Well, there's a certain amount of contemporary pop music, and which I don't listen to very often, But when I happen to do hear a song, when you listen to it, a lot of times you don't hear that, drummer, bass player, guitar player, keyboard player, singer kind of playing off of each other. Yeah. You've got something where from sampling, sequencing, and other production techniques, you've got a music producer, and then the rest of it is vocal. It's like this could be created on primarily on drum machine and this and that, and then just throw in some color with keyboards or guitar or whatnot. And that's maybe a little bit. I may be being a little bit rough on the contemporary pop scene, but in any event, because let's face it, in the early '80s and into the mid '80s, I mean, there's just synthesizers were everywhere in pop music, even if it wasn't techno pop. And techno pop was as we've said, was a big thing at that time. Yeah. But let's so I think that this is an important, in my opinion, it's an important element. It's definitely worth talking about. Yeah. I've got a vinyl copy which I've had for a while. The cover is pretty computer. It's a computer. Yeah. And it shows four guys. There's four guys in the band, Kraftwerk Computer World. And you look on the back cover, and it shows the four members of the band, and they're like at a console. And look at their hair. Those aren't that it isn't their hair. It looks like one-piece plastic wigs. Yeah. Very, very synthetic. Yeah. Very, very not real. Very man machine. Very man machine. And on the dust sleeve, you look at, there's a picture. It shows them from the back. Yeah. They're standing at the console. Now this one is kind of important, I think. It shows the band members, and they've got the one-piece plastic wigs, but each of them is holding a handheld device. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit in a little while. But none of them, no one's holding drumsticks. No one's holding a guitar neck. Mm-hmm. They're holding handheld machines. Yeah, is what they're holding. So that's the record itself. So let's start talking about it. And the first track on side one, which is the side we're talking about, is called Computer World. It's the title track. And why don't we just listen to some of that, and then we'll start talking about it.
Sounds good.
Well, there it is. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, you've got a drum machine, you've got these repetitive synthetic sounds that kind of keep a beat, and then you've got some color that kind of comes in. to give the song its melody, if you will. I use that term loosely. So I mean, this is all sound that's created synthetically.
Yeah.
And the lyrics pretty sparse. Interpol and Deutsche Bank, FBI and Scotland Yard. So they're talking about the centers of power and money. And then the voice that was probably put through a vocoder device, like you referred to earlier. One of the things that that this band was instrumental in sort of bringing into the music business. But business, numbers, money, people, computer world. And so it's sort of like saying, okay, there's all these different things: business, numbers, money, people. And kind of like in the first verse with the FBI and Scotland Yard, they repeat it twice, repetitive. And it's just these things are all becoming interrelated, and they're all you see these columns of numbers, computers. We live in computer world. Now at the time, in 1981, when people are listening to this, if they could imagine what life was going to be like in terms of the intertwining role that computers have on just the day-to-day life of the average person, it would be they wouldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Because how do I know that? Because I think back to when I was first listening to shit like this in the early 80s, before the idea of owning a computer at home had ever entered my mind.
Yeah.
It's astonishing.
Well,
it's astonishing.
I think part of this, and where some of this comes from, I think it's interesting to look at where this band came from. This band was from Dusseldorf, Germany. Now, we're used to a lot of like the when we think of from Europe, the British invasion of music, right? A lot of the acts that came from that. I mean, a town like Liverpool, for example, where this was a working industrial factory port type town, right? Where these bands, they'd play covers from the United States, and people were going to pubs to relax after a work day. They had greasy hands, and you can kind of picture that environment, and where rock and roll music was just a part of what they were doing. Dusseldorf was not a factory industrial town. Dusseldorf was a business, finance, communications type center. Yeah, there were some factories and I mean, as there are in all larger cities, but its real focus was, I mean, aside from Frankfurt, it was the financial center. A lot of financial stuff going on, a lot of business, numbers, money, people, right? In Dusseldorf. So, I mean, they kind of coming from a little bit different space than a lot of your more traditional like working class European rock and roll bands that we may have heard from. And so these are the organizations that were using computers first. First, the cops, Interpol, Scotland Yard, the FBI, and then big business. Yeah. Those were the people that at the time were using computers on a regular basis. To your point, Mike, us walking on the street, we didn't own a computer at home. We weren't, and certainly the idea that, and I would say it's not just day to day, minute to minute, people are engaging with computers on their phones and the internet and connectivity and that type of thing. I mean, if anything, we've come a lot farther than what they were talking about back then. So, but I do think that where they came from was a part of that, because these leading edge type organizations that were the first ones, that's what was going on around them as they were putting this music together.
Well, and the later in the song, we didn't hear it on the clip that was played, but when the one of the sets of lyrics is crime, travel, communication, entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, for purposes of, let's say, computer security, what do you need? You need a cell phone, because when you put your username and password into, say, your medical portal,
Yeah.
some of the security systems, they want to send a verification code to you so that you can put it in, so that that's how they can confirm it's you.
Two-factor authentication. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like you can't. I mean, when I was still working, there was a security setup for our computers, and you had to have a cell phone to use remote desktop at home.
Yeah.
There was no other way that you could do it.
Yeah.
There's and so in any event, it was, in addition to just being kind of an interesting observation at the time about something that was clearly starting to happen big time in certain areas, as law enforcement, banking, and whatnot. It's an incredibly prescient concept. We either live in or are moving into a computer world.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of when art, whether it's literature or films or music, does a good job at anticipating the future, I always find that fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, anytime someone mentions Alexa to me, I always quote dialogue from 2001.
Mm-hmm.
For example, and so this is, affirmative, Dave. I read you. Open the pod bay doors, Hal. Sorry, Dave.
Sorry.
I'm afraid I can't do that.
Can't do that.
But this is, and I don't want to make this music more important than it is. It's technopop, it's synth pop.
Yeah.
But it is the perfect vehicle for describing a world where machines are slowly taking over what's happening. And I mean, especially in the current era where, one of the big topics of just, socially, politically, business, AI, artificial intelligence. And there's a term, the singularity for when, and stuff like that. So I think that in addition to them being sort of innovative artists in terms of being one of the primary developers of the synth pop, techno pop style of music, they were able to connect it to something that was illustrating how these non-human forms of creation were going to proliferate.
Yeah.
So they were onto something.
They absolutely were, and they were building something that, I mean, if you look at, you brought up AI. I mean, and one of the things that certainly people that are creative are concerned about is AI creating music, and the idea that more and more, human created music is falling by the wayside, and more AI generated music is taking control. Well, if you listen to a lot of the AI generated music, especially the stuff that's not that good, it sounds like this. And I don't mean that this isn't that good, because what they were doing back then was hard, right? I mean, it took a lot of, because computers and electronic devices and music were used in making this album, but computers were not. This was not like fed into a computer and then things were edited like they do nowadays with these things. They created the sounds electronically, but the whole recording process was still basically analog. The stuff was fed in. It had to be mixed and dubbed, just like your conventional 4-piece band, right? Had to be done. They were just using electronic instruments, and they were kind of leading the way, as we talked about, on the types of equipment that they were using. You fast forward to now, and it's like this is the type of stuff that AI is pumping out. And to your point, it's not that this music was some type of blueprint that is being followed, but it was very interesting how they saw this is what's happening here, and I believe they would be amazed at how much farther society has come from a computer perspective. I mean, I think we're much more of a computer world than they ever were trying to describe in this song.
Yeah, it's no longer science fiction. I mean, the graphics on the album cover, for example. I mean, it looked like fiction. It didn't look like something that was supposed to be a realistic portrayal of how life was at that time. If anything, it was sort of like a foreshadowing a potentially dystopian future that might never happen. Mm-hmm. It was, and I don't think they were trying to. I don't know if they were predicting that this is a dystopian future that we think is going to happen.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is that the relevance of computers to life in general, and the mechanization of the creation of music that was going to eventually happen, I think was very prescient. When you're talking about the fact that they had to actually create these sounds and record them in a more or less conventional analog fashion, like Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon, the cash register sound at the beginning of Money, something that can be created digitally with a synthesizer. I mean, they had to splice tape to make that happen. And so in any case, Computer World is the first track.
And it just real quickly, just we've talked a lot about kind of the focus and the music, but musically, and it's like as you first listen to this, it's like again, there's a lot of repetition and that type of thing that goes into these songs. But I mean, I found that this is very good music. In listening to this as we were getting ready for this podcast, there was some time the other morning where I was in my office taking care of some bills or something, and I had this music on. And it's like if you need to focus on something and you want some like music in the background, this is really good music for that, right? It's got enough of a beat where you're not kind of like fading off, yet it's got a kind of focus-inducing quality to it. It's hard to describe. People should listen to it. And while you've got some things that you're trying to take care of, it worked really well. It's surprising because I hadn't picked up any Kraftwerk in a little while, and I actually enjoyed listening to it while I was taking care of some stuff around here.
There's certain scenarios where this music goes over fairly well, and it's usually as background. Not something that people want to dance to, or sit and kind of listen to and pick apart the lyrics are not the focus of this material. The concepts that they're talking about are alluded to in the lyrics, but the music really takes the laboring oar in trying to put the message across.
Yeah, and I mean, I would actually say though, I mean, when you're talking about dancing, like you're in a bar with a little dance floor and something just inspires you to get on your feet and dance. No, that's not what this is like. But when you're talking about like EDM kind of dance music, I mean, I say that this fits in there fairly well, right? It's I think you talked about before, this isn't the type of music that we go out on a weekend necessarily to pursue. I mean, if given the option, we're wanting to hear some guitar and that type of thing. But I'll tell you what, there's a lot of people that do enjoy that, that electrical dance music, and some of the origins of that music of today, people will point to Kraftwerk, right, as starting that out. So, from a dance perspective, there certainly are people that are going to enjoy dancing to this.
No. Well, in any case, Computer World is the first track and the title track. And moving on, the second track is called Pocket Calculator. And now that's something that was very prevalent, as we were, in high school, the Texas Instruments calculator.
Yes.
And, if you took trigonometry in high school, you kind of needed that for the sine, cosine function to do your calculations, because they weren't teaching kids how to use slide rules anymore because these new products were available. So Pocket Calculator was a computerized device to some extent. And I don't know, I can't talk the talk about the technology, but I think it's fair to say that there was some computer technology that went into
circuitry. Yeah, absolutely.
Pocket calculators.
Yes.
And that was something that, like I say, in most any junior high or high school, a lot of people would have pocket calculators. So they were very prevalent in the culture at that time. And this track, the Computer World, the first track, there was a certain contemplative aspect to the music. That synthesized, what I referred to as kind of like the melody, was sort of kind of ponder. What does it all mean, sort of thing. This song is much more. It's a little goofier, a little more ho-hummy in terms of things. And why don't we just listen to the first minute or so before we continue our discussion to give the listeners a taste of what I'm talking about, and then we'll continue after.
Okay.
Okay, so there I think you see what I mean. I'm the operator with my pocket calculator.
Mm-hmm.
I am adding and subtracting. I'm controlling and composing. I'm the operator. It's kind of like, hi ho, hi ho, it's off to work we go. Like we were talking about before the clip was played. This had become a very common, visible piece of technology in the world, and this is kind of what it sounds like to use it.
Well, and the goofiness of the song is almost from the perspective of someone who's not a nerd, and they're looking at this person who's constantly spending time on their pocket calculator, and they're making fun of them, right? Oh, what are you doing with your calculator? Oh, I'm adding and subtracting, and it's like, look at all these things that I can do. And to your point, I mean, there's people around today that don't use pocket calculators. People aren't walking around with pocket calculators. So for those of you that don't know, they're about this size,
like this,
right? They're about this size. And if you can picture someone that would spend a large percentage of their waking hours staring at this device and look at all these things that I can add and subtract, and I can control and compose, and I mean, which is what what we're hearing, and again, I think the goofiness is intentional. They're like, look at this person is completely, sinking their life into this little device that they carry around in their pocket. And yet again, pretty prophetic on the part of Kraftwerk, because people are walking around spending a hell of a lot more time on their phones than anybody ever did with a pocket calculator, and they did. There was a little fun made of the people that spent too much time on their pocket calculators.
Yeah. So it's a little bit more lighthearted, but I mean musically, it's the same sort of stuff. It's the same format as the first track. Basically, it's a little more lighthearted, and gets down to something that was a little bit more run of the mill at that time. And there's another track that I'd like to play for on this one, to show a little bit more of the, as you say, kind of playful aspects of this song, and we'll finish up our discussion of this one after.
Gotcha.
Pressing down a special key, it plays a little melody. By pressing down a special key, it plays a little melody.
Okay, well that's sort of like the bridge section of this song, and by pressing down a special key, it plays a little melody. Now, when I had out the dust sleeve of the album, and it showed the members of the band all holding handheld devices, that's what they were creating the music on, and I don't know how visible it was when I held up the album cover, but a number of those devices had little keyboards on them, with white and with the sharps and the flats and everything.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of, and there's are some music videos back in the day that you would see where one of the musicians was holding up a handheld thing and playing it on these MTV videos. And I think that's I think an interesting little gimmick that they did by pressing down, because that's not just how someone is doing their adding, subtracting, computing.
Yeah.
That's how they're creating the music.
Yeah.
Is with these electronic devices that make these sounds. And so I thought that was a very clever and appropriate little thing to throw in on what's basically kind of a lighthearted song.
Yeah.
But that was relevant to the message that they were presenting through this album and these various songs. That here's where things are going. Here's the direction that things are headed in. And I don't want to overplay the significance of this song, because I think at ground zero it's a fairly lighthearted, goofy song, but not without relevance to the bigger picture that they're getting at by composing these various pieces of music about the involvement of computers in our world.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree.
So track number 2, for the most part self-explanatory,
Pocket calculator.
Let's go to track number 3, which is called Numbers. And this song will be, and pretty much the third and fourth tracks are going to be less lyrical and more sound oriented. And before let's play the beginning of Numbers, about the first minute or so, and then start our discussion on the other side. All right. Now, we mentioned earlier that this song can work well, or this kind of music can work well in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And later in the 80s, when I was going to college at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, I worked for a period of time at the student union. There was what was called the Resource Center, where they had copy service with some Xerox machines and whatnot, and also computer terminals, most of which were what we called then IBM compatible, with a 5-inch floppy disk. And then we had one Macintosh computer, the Mac, which used the 3.5-inch floppy and had the mouse. No mouse on the IBM compatibles at that time.
Yep.
But in any case, every now and again, just for larfs, I'd play Computer World, because we had a boombox. And that was back in the day when I had a tape deck and I could make a Maxell blank cassette.
Yeah.
Put the album on it. You could usually fit two sides onto a 90-minute, one side of a 90-minute tape, and then so you could get two albums on one Maxell 90-minute tape.
Yep.
And when I play this at the Resource Center, when people would hear that sort of oddly syncopated synthesizer on this track, someone would invariably come up to the counter and, "What is this? What is this?" And
can't you do something about this?
It's the blah blah blah. So this is probably the most musically adventurous they get on this side is that synthesizer opening, and it and we'll play another track for the kind of the balance of the song, but these guys were making music.
Yeah.
It wasn't all just electronic beeps and goofy stuff like Pocket Calculator. They were actually creating music, and I've always found that that's one of the more interesting sounds that I've heard in any synth pop music was that portion of this song.
Yeah.
It's a little more artistic than some of the other more mechanized type of stuff that they were doing on this album.
I'd agree. I mean, I think that some of this, when you look at that notion of, like you said, they were creating music, and I mean, we do get our mindset into, very guitar-oriented music. It's, music we've been listening to for years. It's music we liked in high school, and you're kind of looking and waiting for that guitar, and it sometimes takes almost like a little palate cleanser or something to be able to step back from that and then to really try to listen to the music right? Electronic or synthesizer driven music, and not be waiting for the guitar, right? It's like, okay, well, they'll do this and then there'll be a guitar solo and that type of thing. So as is often the case with expectations, whether it's the music or anything else that is out there in life, right? If you can set those aside to really try to listen to this stuff, great album. If you're going to listen, you haven't heard, and I'd imagine that more so than a lot of our sides, we'll have some listeners that have never heard of any of these songs. Great music to put, kind of clear your head, put the headphones on and listen to this music with what is going on, because it kind of sometimes takes that reset to get away from expecting the guitar and to just be able to enjoy the music for what you're listening to, even if it is more of a mechanical or electronic digital sounding type music. I mean, it is music, and some of it is interesting, and some of it is got a beat that will give you just as much of a heartbeat and get up as guitar music. I do think, though, that it takes a little bit of, like I said, a reset or a palate cleanser before you dive into it to really be able to appreciate that.
In trying to interpret, just music as to what it's about, but when it's just instrumental and there's no lyrical content, you get classical music that's supposed to tell a story and for whatnot, for ballet and whatnot, and that's fine. But, it's a little bit different with rock and roll music or pop music and the type of instrumentation. There's tones and this and that, but that's kind of paints with primary colors. Mm-hmm. But there is a something when the synthesizer part in this song, I determined that to me, what it is it's the transition from flesh and blood to ones and zeros. Mm-hmm. And there's and for example, the original movie Tron. Mm-hmm. And I don't know when that came out. I think whether it came out before or after this, I don't remember. It was right around
this time.
It was the original was. And there's a part in the movie where the Jeff Bridges character basically gets absorbed into the computer. Mm-hmm. And he's existing like inside the computer. And there was a short story written by an author, Harlan Ellison, who was kind of science fiction, but some other types of stories as well. A very interesting writer, but he wrote a short story called "I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream," which was about some people that were living inside of a computer, and. So from the beginning of the song, that initial part, and the synthesizer, in my mind, is where flesh and blood is being transformed into computer. Mm-hmm. You've moved into a different realm, and it's taken you from one place to the other. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, first of all, I just did some quick checking there. 1982 is when Tron came out. So, this is the same time period we're talking about as people are starting to think about these things, and they very well could have been listening to this on the set, right, of Tron while it was going on. And when we talked about, you've read that book Code, right? That talks about electronics and computers and that type of thing. And numbers are the go-between between real life and computers. It's the last real life thing before you get into the binary ones and zeros of a computer. So when you're taking a look, and it's international, this song, we hear not just one language of this stuff, of these different numbers, right? To make a computer useful, you've got to distill life down to numbers, and then they can take and go from there. And the importance of numbers in computers, because computers have become more important, are much more prevalent. So, for example, I wasn't concerned about it because I was just graduated from high school at this time. But the notion of all the numbers that everybody pays so much attention to nowadays that, quite frankly, we just didn't pay as much attention to in the 80s, whether it be the NASDAQ and the Dow, or whether it be your A1C level, or whether, numbers now, it's like, what's your number? Even the weather, right? It's going to rain today. The notion of degrees and temperature just wasn't as much a part of but everything is so digital and everything is numeric now. So it is, it's much more a part of the news. It's much more a part of our life and that type of thing. And I think it's because of this idea that there's so much more computer world now. That's how the computers communicate with us. Like I said, transitioning out of the computer, you get numbers, right? And it's only been recently that we've seen text come out of computers with ChatGPT and this. I mean, that's relatively new. The rest of it has been, communicating with numbers. So I think it's very intentional, the relevance of numbers in this particular cycle of songs, and how we experience computers and how computers experience us. In the most basic sense, I mean, people have talked about the fact that, mathematics is what provides the building blocks for how to do things, how to create things, engineering, etc. And language is how people can communicate with each other to take those building blocks and create more things with them. Yeah. So you get numbers and language. And the computers are sort of taking, because one of the things of AI, it's like people listen to books on tape instead of sitting down and reading them. People don't want to compose an email at the end of the day, so they want AI to do it. And people don't read books as much as they used to, and there's more blah blah blah. It's so that this and the numbers you talk about, because when someone talks about code, someone talks about what makes a computer do what it does, the offhand phrase is, that's all ones and zeros. Yeah. And when you read that book Code, you realize that, like binary numbers, it's just a different symbol system for describing the same things. Yeah. But, it's just you got to read a book like that in order to understand that. You can't just, what's the difference between base 10, base 4, and binary? Well, it's difficult to kind of articulate these things. But let's listen to another track that basically will give the listeners a taste of what the rest of the song is after that synthesizer part that we listened to, and we can finish up on this track on the other side. Sounds good. Now, so there you are. And, kind of like I said, the song kind of starts out with that, there's some phrases are being repeated, and then we get this weird synthesizer. But now we're in the computer, and all that's happening is numbers are swirling around. Yeah.
And there's different languages. They're basically counting in different languages. I
Yeah.
don't think it was contained in the clip, but later on they start referring to it's either I assume it's Japanese numbers, might be Chinese numbers, but basically just they're 1, 2, 3, 4 in German, Spanish,
Yeah.
different languages, and there's not necessarily any more significance because all of the lyrics in this song are numbers.
Yeah.
Just reciting, counting off numbers in different languages. That's all it is. So there is really no lyrical message other than numbers.
Numbers.
Um,
Literally.
and speaking of language, one something that Kraftwerk started doing before this album, but they would put out English language versions of the album and German language versions. So, we heard lyrics in English, on the first two tracks here. But if you bought this record in Germany, the music would be the same, but the lyrics, the vocals would be in German.
Yeah.
So they were, they put out, that's just a fun fact about this album and Kraftwerk in general.
Yeah.
But I think this is sonically, this is the most interesting track on the side. And I've given a very personal, interpretation of what I think it means. I mean, it means whatever people, there really is no, oh, that's a good interpretation. That's a lousy interpretation. I mean, it's not that kind of song.
Yeah.
But it got the attention of people at the Resource Center. What is this?
That's right. Who wanted to know what it was? Well, I mean, I mean, we mentioned it earlier talking about this song. I mean, the computer is distilling everything down and processing these things all as numbers, and which, by the way, if you're using something like ChatGPT or these other generative AI things that are text, what's going on in the background is all numbers, right? I mean, it's the computer is not looking at the question that you had. It's breaking it down. It's taking each syllable and assigning a number to it and then matching. I mean, it's all numbers. There's some great stuff on YouTube you can check out about how that actually works. And you'll find that, yes, it's all numbers doesn't matter what language you're speaking. And again, very relevant for what was actually happening. But to go to the music, like you said, I think this is musically, a very interesting piece on this side of that just kind of got the most involved musically to listen to, and kind of sets us up to kind of roll into that last track on the side.
Yeah, and like you say, it's all numbers. That's kind of a good way of kind of encapsulating. Yeah, they weren't necessarily, other than reciting numbers in different languages, there was no lyrical message. But musically, it just should look. There are numbers flying around everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's again something that's probably more true now than it was when they created the song.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned the book Code. For anybody out there listening who finds these things interesting, that's a fascinating book, and allows you to understand the basics of electricity, and then how using these binary systems you're able to just sort of build on it. It's a fascinating book for people that want to understand how computers work.
I'll pop on the YouTube link for this. I'll pop a link to that book in the comments. I mean, it's a fascinating book that will leave you with an understanding of not only how electricity works, but how computers work, which is a lot of people are, and it does so in a way that make that the any man can understand this. So great piece of work.
All right, the final track on this side it's called Computer World 2, and it's basically a reprise of Computer World, although it doesn't have any of the lyrics. and it has some of the lyrics from, or some of the numbers from the track we just listened to. So let's listen to some of that, because it kind of goes back to the, what I think I described it as the more contemplative tone of the title track, the first track on the side, to kind of wrap up this introduction to how the band sees the computer world. And we can finish up our discussion after.
Okay.
Okay. Again, basically, this is just a reprise of the first song, but it just, as this is going, you can hear the numbers in the background, and it's just sort of like, okay, this ship is sailing. We told you this at the beginning of the side. We've kind of done a little of this and a little of that, and we're right back to it. We are sailing full speed ahead into the computer world.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what they're saying here, in my humble opinion.
Well, and I would agree, and it is put together as a side of music. Another reason why this is a very appropriate side for our podcast here, because it takes, let's set Pocket Calculator aside, because you described it, you used the word it's kind of a goofy representation of one of the people that's kind of dealing with the computer world. But we take the other songs, we started with Computer World, and we take these numbers, and now we've kind of brought those together to close out and to bookend, the end of this side. It kind of brings it together, whether, the data / electronic digital message and the music of this to bring this side to a close. And it's kind of bringing all those songs together into one message, because it is going to be numbers that takes us into the computer world.
Yeah. So in any case, those are the 4 tracks on Kraftwerk's Computer World side 1, and and I think this is a good example of how there's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of material that kind of fits into the rock and roll ethos.
Mm-hmm.
That isn't necessarily rock and roll, but that is worth checking out for classic rock people that are interested in music from the classic rock era. And I mentioned at the very beginning, Kraftwerk is not. I'm not going to number them amongst my favorite artists. I'm not going to number this album amongst my favorite albums. And I certainly am not going to identify synth pop as one of my go-to styles of music. I mean, some of the artists that I mentioned earlier, like Depeche Mode, in the 80s, they were big. I've never knowingly heard a Depeche Mode song.
You might have.
Well,
but,
not knowingly.
yeah.
Not knowingly.
Yeah.
Pet Shop, same thing. You know,
Yeah.
When that stuff was going on at the time, I just didn't give a shit. You know,
Yeah.
I wasn't interested. But Kraftwerk came across my radar screen, and I kind of delved into it a little bit. And there may be material from some of these other artists that I referred to. I mean, I've heard, the Human League.
Yeah.
I've heard Gary Newman because it was
Yeah.
on the radio, and whatnot. But and there may be listeners who will find that stuff fascinating and well worth their time. And if kind of poking your nose into an album like this opens doors into, if you like it, and what were other people doing? Other artists that were using the same kind of approach to making music. What kind of stuff were they doing? I think this is this album is important for reasons that I've talked about over the course of the podcast. I don't need to regurgitate them here.
Well, they were for the type of it's a different type of music than some of the traditional stuff that we talk about on here. I mean, it was critically acclaimed. It is, you have a lot of people and musicians, whether it be some of the artists that you've talked about or other, more popular music of today that point back to Kraftwerk as an influence. They were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2021. I mean, so this is not like some obscure, type of electronic stuff. It's significant music, and for no other reason than it is significant. It is worth, a listen to. And I mean, I think that, again, you put this whole side together, you've got an interesting 20 minutes of music that you're listening to.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe to sum up what I was trying to get at is that this band, and particularly this album, they accurately anticipated what was happening in the music world, as well as things that were happening technologically in the world as a whole.
Yeah.
So for those reasons alone, taken as you say 20 minutes to check out a side of this is, in my humble opinion, well worth anybody's time.
Absolutely. So a very interesting, kind of groundbreaking band, Kraftwerk, and this, I mean, I would agree. This is the album to check out from them. A very interesting album and a great side, and a good conversation, Mike.
All right, Mark. We will talk to you next time.